On what was supposed to be the happiest day of her life, Emily sat at the altar, her heart full of hope and her dreams about to come true. But just as the final note of the wedding march played, her fiancé turned away and walked out, leaving her alone in front of a stunned crowd. In the midst of cruel whispers and harsh judgment, a dark figure appeared, someone she never expected, a man with a past as mysterious as his intentions. And with one simple act, everything she thought she knew about love was about to change forever. If you are new here, then please subscribe this channel and show thumbs up by liking the video. Now let's move to this wonderful story. Emily had waited for this moment her whole life. She had imagined it countless times, standing at the altar, her heart full of joy, her dreams all coming true. Today, in her white dress that shimmered like the first light of morning, she felt it was finally happening. The village church was filled with the soft scent of white roses, their petals gently swaying in the calm breeze that passed through the open windows. The sound of soft music floated through the air, setting a peaceful mood as Emily sat in her wheelchair at the front, just a few feet from the altar. The world around her seemed to pause, waiting for the most magical moment of her life. Emily had spent so many years imagining this day. It wasn't just about the dress, the flowers, or the ceremony. It was about love. It was about the promise she and Jason had made to each other. It was about feeling truly seen and loved, despite the wheelchair that had been a part of her life since birth. She believed this moment, the moment she'd dreamed of, would be the beginning of forever, the start of a new chapter where nothing would matter except the love they shared. As the music began to fade, she looked at Jason, her heart racing with anticipation. She could see his face filled with the same excitement. Today was their day. Today they would make promises to each other that would last a lifetime. She couldn't wait to hear him say the words that would change everything, to declare his love and commit to a future together. The warmth in her chest grew with each beat of her heart, and the future seemed so clear. She was not just a woman in a wheelchair. She was a woman loved deeply, cherished by the man she trusted most. But just as the final note of the wedding march played, something unexpected happened. Jason, her fiancé, leaned in close to his best man, whispered something quickly, and then pulled away. Without a word, he turned around and began walking away from the altar, leaving Emily staring at his retreating back in stunned silence. Her mind raced, trying to make sense of what was happening. Surely this was a mistake. Surely he was just going to the restroom or something, but no. As he reached the door and stepped out, he turned his back on her. The gasps from the crowd echoed in the quiet church. Emily's breath caught in her throat, her hands gripping the sides of her wheelchair, knuckles turning white. Confusion spread quickly across the room. The guests, still in shock, started whispering. Some of them exchanged puzzled looks. Others sat frozen, unable to comprehend what they had just witnessed. Emily sat there frozen, unable to make sense of it herself. Was this a joke? Was this really happening? Her heart, which had been so full of love just moments ago, began to sink with each passing second. The whispers soon grew louder, sharper, more judgmental. Why would he marry a cripple? One voice said, not even trying to hide the disgust in their tone. It was never real, another murmured. Emily's face turned pale, her body trembling as the words hit her like stones. She had spent her whole life fighting for acceptance, for respect, for love. And now, in the moment when she needed it the most, the crowd turned their backs on her, just as Jason had. The people she had known all her life, the ones she thought she could count on, were now echoing the same cruel words she'd always feared. They saw her wheelchair before they saw her. Emily's heart shattered, but she didn't let the world see it. Her gaze remained straight ahead, her back straight. She wouldn't cry. Not now. Not in front of them. She held her bouquet tightly, as if it could somehow hold the pieces of her broken heart together. But even the delicate white flowers in her hands couldn't stop the cracks from forming inside her. She had been so sure that today was going to be the happiest day of her life. Now it was turning into the worst. The love she had believed in felt like a distant memory, slipping through her fingers like sand. The crowd slowly began to shuffle out of the church. No one looked at her. No one offered a kind word, not even a simple glance to show they cared. Some avoided her eyes, not knowing what to say. Others lowered their heads in shame, but none of them reached out to her. It was as if she was invisible. The people who had once been her friends, her family, were now nothing more than distant figures, walking past her without a word. As the last of the guests filed out of the church, Emily remained sitting in her wheelchair at the altar, her eyes fixed on the empty doorway. Her wedding veil hung limply around her shoulders, brushing against the floor. It had once symbolized the start of something beautiful, something full of promise. Now it was just a sad reminder of everything she had lost. The petals scattered around her, once a symbol of joy, now lay like cold, forgotten memories on the ground. Emily didn't know how long she had been sitting there. Time felt like it had stopped. She was alone, abandoned, her future wiped away in an instant. But even in that moment of crushing loneliness, she refused to let the world see her break. She wouldn't give them the satisfaction. She would not let them see the tears that threatened to fall. As the door to the church swung open, the last few guests filed out, murmuring among themselves, their voices barely audible above the sound of Emily's quiet breathing. The sun outside seemed to have lost its warmth. The world outside felt cold, indifferent to her pain. And yet somehow she still sat there, holding herself together with a strength she didn't even know she had. This was not how she had imagined her wedding day. But as Emily sat there holding her broken heart together, she couldn't have known that this moment of heartbreak would soon lead her to something truly extraordinary. Emily sat quietly, her hand still gripping the bouquet of flowers. The weight of her heartbreak felt almost unbearable, but she held on. Her wheelchair seemed to have grown heavier, its wheels sinking deeper into the cold stone floor. The church, once filled with music and joy, now felt empty, echoing with the sounds of her shattered dreams. The world outside, bright with sunlight, felt distant and out of reach. She had imagined that today would be the start of a beautiful journey, but instead it was the end of everything she had hoped for. The crowd had quickly dispersed, leaving the church in a strange, uncomfortable silence. Emily's eyes remained fixed on the door where Jason had walked out, but there was no sign of him. No one came to comfort her, to offer a kind word, or even a glance that might have told her she wasn't truly alone. The only sound was the soft rustling of her wedding veil, dragging across the floor as if to remind her of what could have been. It was difficult for Emily to breathe, her chest tight with grief, but she refused to let herself cry. She had spent too many years building a life, proving that she was more than her wheelchair. She was strong, capable, and deserving of love, but now, it felt as though the world had just proved her wrong. The cruel whispers that had followed her all her life seemed to have come to life today, louder than ever before. Why would he marry a cripple? The words echoed in her mind, replaying over and over. She could feel them tearing at her, reminding her of every doubt and insecurity she had ever felt. But Emily refused to let them see her break. She held herself still, her back straight, her head high. She would not let the world witness her pain, not today, not in front of them. Her hands trembled slightly as she held the bouquet tighter, but her face remained composed. Her smile, once full of hope, was now replaced by a quiet, aching strength. She had come to the altar expecting love, but instead she had been handed a lesson in cruelty. Yet in that moment she found something within herself, something powerful, something that refused to let her give up. The guests had left, their footsteps fading into the distance. Some had cast pitying glances her way, while others avoided her gaze altogether, their faces twisted in judgment. No one spoke to her. No one came to ask if she was okay. But Emily didn't want their pity. She didn't need it. She didn't need anyone to feel sorry for her. She needed them to see her for who she was, not for her wheelchair, but for her heart, her spirit, her strength. But the silence around her felt deafening, as if the world was closing in, and no one was left to notice her existence. She glanced around the church, her eyes falling on the scattered petals that had once symbolized love and joy. Now they lay on the floor, trampled and forgotten. Everything she had imagined for this day, her wedding day, had slipped away in a single moment. It wasn't just Jason who had rejected her. It was the world. The people she had trusted had all turned their backs on her. The silence was a harsh reminder of how alone she felt. But even as the tears threatened to fall, Emily refused to cry. She wasn't going to let the world see her as weak. She wouldn't allow herself to be defined by this moment of rejection. She knew what she had to do. She had to stand strong, even if she had to do it alone. She had to prove to herself and to everyone else that she was more than just her disability. She had to prove that she was worthy of love, worthy of respect. And she would find a way to show the world just that. As the minutes passed, the weight of the situation began to sink in deeper. The reality of it all was overwhelming. This was not how it was supposed to be. This was not the love story she had dreamed of. But even in the midst of her heartbreak, Emily couldn't let go of the belief that she was still deserving of love. She was still deserving of a happy ending, even if it wasn't the one she had expected. The air outside seemed cold, almost as if the world was reflecting her pain. But Emily stayed where she was, her gaze fixed on the ground in front of her. She didn't know how long she had been sitting there, but it felt like an eternity. The church had emptied, but the silence remained. She didn't know what the future held, but she knew she couldn't stay here forever. She had to find a way to move forward, even if it meant leaving this church behind. It wasn't until the last of the guests had disappeared that Emily finally began to move. She shifted in her wheelchair, trying to stand, trying to feel the ground beneath her feet. But the weight of her heartbreak kept pulling her back. Thus, dream of the perfect wedding, the perfect life with Jason was gone. Yet somehow, as she sat there, surrounded by the remnants of a dream that had died, Emily felt a small spark of something. It was a tiny glimmer of hope, a reminder that there was still more to her story. This moment of heartbreak wasn't the end. It was just the beginning of something new. And little did she know, something extraordinary was about to happen. The world had turned its back on her, but soon, someone would show her that love, true love, wasn't defined by the judgments of others. It was in the quiet strength she carried within herself, and it would be in the kindness of someone who truly saw her, not for her wheelchair, but for everything she was. In that moment, Emily knew that she was not alone. Not completely. Not forever. And somehow that small truth was enough to keep her going. The sun outside the church had begun to dip lower in the sky, casting long shadows over the stone path that led to the steps. Emily sat there alone, still clutching her bouquet. The petals, now limp and faded, seemed to reflect the sadness in her heart. The once joyful sounds of music and laughter had been replaced with an uncomfortable silence that wrapped itself around her like a heavy blanket. Her thoughts, still clouded with shock and hurt, were interrupted by the sound of a deep rumble in the distance. It started as a low growl, slowly building in intensity, until the sound of a motorcycle's engine roared to life. The noise sliced through the air, breaking the tension in the churchyard. Emily's gaze shifted toward the sound, her eyes narrowing as the motorcycle came into view. The rider was a tall figure, clad in black leather and tattoos, his presence commanding attention. It wasn't just the roar of the engine that caught everyone's attention. It was the man himself. He slowed the motorcycle as he reached the bottom of the church steps, cutting off the sound of the engine as he pulled to a stop. The crowd that had been quietly whispering among themselves, avoiding Emily's eyes, now turned toward him. Their murmurs faltered as they took in the figure before them. Who was this man? And what was he doing here? He wasn't someone any of them had expected to see. In fact, he was the last person anyone would have guessed would show up at a broken bride's wedding. His name was Damon, and he had built a reputation in the small town for being a man whose past was shrouded in mystery. A man who didn't follow the rules. People spoke of him with a mix of fear and curiosity. He was known for his rough demeanor, his toughness, and his tendency to keep to himself. He wasn't someone the townspeople would ever invite to a wedding, and certainly not someone they expected to come to the rescue of a woman who had just been left at the altar. Yet here he was, standing tall and strong, his boots clicking on the stone as he dismounted the bike. Emily's heart skipped a beat, unsure of what was happening. She had just been abandoned by the man she loved, and now this stranger was approaching her with steady steps. His presence seemed to challenge the air itself, forcing the whispers of the crowd to quiet down. Emily could feel her pulse quicken, her body tense. Why was he here? What could he possibly want with her? Damon's dark eyes met hers, and for the first time all day, Emily felt seen. Truly seen. The gaze he held wasn't filled with pity, nor was it cold with judgment. There was something else. Something deep and understanding, like he could see right through the layers of hurt and despair she was trying so desperately to hide. She blinked, uncertain of whether this was some cruel joke or a real act of kindness. Without saying a word, Damon took a step closer, his movements slow but purposeful. The crowd, still frozen in place, watched in stunned silence. He reached the bottom of the steps, pausing for a moment before kneeling before Emily. He didn't hesitate. He didn't look at her with sympathy or fear. He simply lowered himself as if he were offering her a part of his own strength, something that she had felt so desperately lacking in the past few hours. If they can't see your worth? Damon's voice was deep but steady. Then let me show them what love really looks like. His words echoed through the quiet space, and Emily's breath caught in her throat. She hadn't expected this. She hadn't expected anyone, especially someone like him, to offer her something so simple yet so profound. The crowd around them seemed to hold their breath, unsure of how to react. But Emily didn't care about the crowd. She didn't care about their opinions or their whispers anymore. For the first time, someone was showing her the kind of love that didn't come with conditions or judgment. Damon gently took her hand in his rough fingers brushing against her trembling skin. The touch was warm, but it was more than just a physical sensation. It was a quiet promise, an understanding that she wasn't alone in this moment. The chaos of the day, the pain of rejection, faded into the background as Emily felt herself draw strength from the man before her. He wasn't here to pity her. He wasn't here to fix her. He was here to honor her, to show her that she deserved to be loved, just as she was. He didn't stand up right away. Instead, he stayed kneeling, his eyes never leaving hers, as if he were waiting for something, waiting for her to see the truth he was offering. And for the first time that day, Emily did see it. She saw her worth. She saw that her disability didn't make her less deserving of love. It didn't make her broken or less valuable. Damon had shown her that in a moment where everything else had failed her. The crowd, still stunned into silence, began to stir, their eyes wide with disbelief. They hadn't expected this. They hadn't expected a man like Damon to show up at a wedding, let alone to make such a bold statement. But Damon wasn't seeking attention. He wasn't performing for the crowd. He wasn't doing this for applause or recognition. He was doing it for Emily. He was doing it because in that moment he knew she deserved more than the life that had been handed to her. Without another word, Damon gently stood, lifting Emily with him. His arms strong but careful. He didn't see her as fragile, nor did he treat her as if she were broken. He treated her like someone who deserved respect, dignity, and love. As he lifted her into his arms, Emily couldn't help but feel a sense of disbelief mixed with gratitude. Someone, finally, saw her for who she truly was. And in that moment she knew that the world was about to change, for both of them. Damon's steps were steady as he began to carry Emily away from the altar. The crowd, still caught in shock, parted before them, but no one dared to speak. Damon had shown them all that love wasn't about perfection. It was about acceptance, respect, and seeing the person for who they truly were, and in his arms, Emily felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. As Damon carried Emily away from the altar, the crowd stood in stunned silence. The weight of the moment hung in the air, as if time had slowed down. Emily's heart raced in her chest, but this time, it wasn't from the pain of rejection. It was from something different, something she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. As Damon's strong arms cradled her gently, she felt herself relax, a sense of safety washing over her. For the first time since she had sat down at the altar, she didn't feel alone. She didn't feel broken. The crowd parted as they walked down the steps. and with each step Damon took, Emily felt a small piece of her shattered world start to heal. The whispers that had filled the church just moments before had faded into nothing. It was as if Damon's presence had silenced everything that had caused her pain. The judgment, the cruel words, the looks of pity, none of it mattered now. It was just her and Damon moving forward together as he carried her away from the wreckage of what was supposed to be her wedding day. The sun had begun to set, casting a warm golden light across the quiet street. It was a peaceful scene, the soft breeze carrying the smell of wildflowers, but for Emily it felt like a moment of rebirth. She had been abandoned, humiliated, but now as Damon held her, it felt like she was being given a second chance. A chance to start over, to find a love that wasn't defined by her disability, but by the strength and kindness of the person who truly saw her. As they made their way to the nearby lake, Emily couldn't help but wonder how this had happened. How had she gone from feeling like the world's biggest failure, the woman left behind at the altar, to being held in the arms of a man who cared, for her not out of pity, but out of something real? Damon wasn't some knight in shining armor come to rescue her from a cruel fate. No, he was something much more rare. He was someone who saw her for who she truly was. He didn't look at her with pity or judgment. He looked at her with respect, with admiration, and with love. As they reached the lake, Damon gently set Emily down on a nearby bench. The breeze tugged at her wedding veil, but instead of the sadness she had felt earlier, a sense of peace began to settle in her heart. The lake shimmered in the fading sunlight, and for the first time all day, Emily felt at ease. She looked up at Damon, her eyes full of gratitude, but there was also a new sense of understanding in them. She wasn't broken. She wasn't less than anyone else. She was just as deserving of love, respect, and happiness as anyone else. And Damon had reminded her of that. He sat down next to her, not saying anything at first. His presence, his quiet strength was enough. For the first time in a long time, Emily didn't feel the need to explain herself to prove her worth. With Damon, she didn't have to. He already saw her for who she was, and that was enough. After a few moments of silence, Damon spoke. "You deserve to be loved, Emily. Not because of what anyone else thinks, but because of who you are. Don't ever let anyone make you feel like you're less than that." Emily turned to him, her heart swelling with emotion. The words he spoke weren't just comforting, they were a promise that he would always be there, that he would never see her as anything less than someone worthy of love. And for the first time, Emily believed it. She believed she was enough. She didn't need to change for anyone. She didn't need to meet anyone's expectations. She just needed to be herself. And Damon, the man who had come into her life unexpectedly, had shown her that. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "Thank you for seeing me, for seeing who I really am." Damon smiled, his rough exterior softening as he looked at her. "You don't have to thank me for that, Emily. It's just the truth." The air around them felt different now. It was no longer filled with the weight of rejection or the sting of judgment. It was filled with something else, something that had been absent for so long. Hope. Hope for a future that was filled with love, kindness, and the kind of acceptance that had always felt out of reach. The lake shimmered under the golden light, the ripples on the water reflecting the quiet strength that had been awakened in Emily. The petals from her wedding bouquet lay scattered around her, remnants of the day that had started in pain but now was transforming into something beautiful. This wasn't the life she had imagined for herself, but it was a new beginning, one that was hers to create. And with Damon by her side, she felt ready to face whatever came next. The world had once told her she wasn't worthy of love. It had told her that she was broken, less than perfect. But in that quiet moment by the lake, surrounded by the warmth of the setting sun and the steady presence of the man who saw her, Emily knew the truth. Love wasn't about being perfect. It was about being real. And Damon had shown her that in a way she would never forget. Together, they sat there by the water, not needing to say anything more. They knew that, in this quiet space, something beautiful had been born, a love built on respect, understanding, and the knowledge that sometimes the greatest strength comes from the most unexpected places.